two American women accepted invitations to a royal compound in a glittering desert capital. They were executed the night they arrived. Families in the United States waited for the phone calls that never came. 3 days later, search teams found two shallow graves in a wasteland outside the city lights. This isn't a story about careless travelers. It's not about naivete or wild spontaneity. It's about two accomplished, thoughtful women, lured by the promise of love, hunted for profit, and erased by men who turned romance into a business model of death. What unfolded inside that mansion shocked investigators across 3 continents and exposed an international machine that had been operating in plain view for years. Kayla Monroe from Mesa Vista, Arizona, was 32 when she boarded Falcon Air Flight 718 to Zahara City on March 15, 2019. She worked as a dental hygienist, owned a modest condo, and spent weekends hiking red rock trails with her golden retriever, Scout. Her friends called her steady, practical, a woman who kept a spare tire, a backup plan, and a plan C. 2 time zones away, in Rainhaven, Washington, 35-year-old software engineer Lena Jo was packing cables, a travel adapter, and 3 backup batteries for a trip she had planned down to the minute. She had emigrated from Taiwan at 5 years old, spoke 3 languages comfortably, and had visited 17 countries. She did things right. She did things carefully. Neither of them fit the stereotype of easy prey. At the end of 2018, Kayla had reluctantly rejoined the dating circuit after a bruising divorce. Her ex, Evan, was controlling and emotionally distant. The separation left her feeling like she donated her 20s to the wrong story. She gave herself permission to start over. She downloaded a handful of apps, thumbed between profiles with measured detachment, and nearly uninstalled everything when a message stopped her scroll. It was from a man named Sheikh Tariq bin Saif al-Khatani. In one photo, he wore a crisp thobe and an understated watch. In another, he leaned against a vintage Bentley in a London street. There were images of yacht decks, scrollwork balconies, and clipped gardens. His first note wasn't hi or hey gorgeous. He wrote, "I saw your photos from the Red Canyons. Do you have a favorite trail? The Southwest is a symphony of color I've only witnessed from the air." He asked about her, not her body. He listened when she answered. They traded stories about hiking. She sent a picture from Cathedral Ridge at sunrise and got back a thoughtful reply about quiet. Days became weeks. His messages lengthened. Tariq told her he was from Noor, a wealthy Gulf emirate, part of the ruling kinship line. He managed real estate and investments across Europe and the Middle East. He studied at King's and spent part of each year in London. His tone wasn't arrogant. It was worldly and curious. "Western women are refreshing," he wrote. "Independent, educated, honest. In my circles, titles walk into the room before the person. I long for a person." It sounded like a confession. In Rainhaven, a parallel script was unfolding. On a professional networking platform that also featured an optional dating tab, a man calling himself Prince Adel bin Rashid Al Mansour reached out to Lena. He claimed a master's degree in international business from a top British university and investments in healthcare tech. His messages opened with genuine questions about an article Lena had shared. "Your post about AI risk thresholds and triage, sharp insights. I'm funding 2 firms tackling hospital scheduling algorithms. Would love your take on the bottlenecks." It started like a collaboration. But he laughed at her jokes, asked about her family, remembered details. He never explained her industry to her. He asked questions that made it clear he respected her expertise. "In my world," he wrote, "people make assumptions about women. My best investments have always been listening." Neither Kayla nor Lena knew they were reading from scripts written by men who had studied their social media, cataloged their hopes and hurts, and reverse-engineered the perfect suitor. The men didn't ask for nude photos. They didn't rush intimacy. They sent gifts that felt meaningful instead of flashy. A slim volume of Gibran's poetry. A rare technical manual Lena once mentioned wanting as a grad student. Handwritten notes arrived on creamy paper with tidy calligraphy. "I thought of you when I read this line." Connection lived between the words. Kayla's best friend, Ana Delgado, watched her light up. "I'm happy you're happy," Ana told her over tacos one night. "But be real. A Sheikh? You video chatted with him?" Kayla bristled at first and then nodded. "Yes. He's exactly who he says he is. I've seen his office. He's real." What she didn't know was that the offices were borrowed for an hour. The cars were rentals. The man wore a designer jacket and practiced an accent, but the credentials were counterfeit. Lena's parents, Helen and Victor, were wary too. "You're careful with everything," her mother said, a wrinkle of worry in her voice. "Why not this?" "Mom, you taught me to be careful," Lena said gently. "I'm going slowly." He's respectful. "We've been talking for months. I know what I'm doing." She did know how to be cautious. She simply didn't know she was inside a tailored performance designed to withstand scrutiny. By January, both men floated the idea of meeting face to face. Tariq suggested New Metro. "I have business in Manhattan in March. Dinner would be the perfect way to start our offline chapter." Adele invited Lena to a cultural festival at his family's estate in Zahara City. "You'll have your own suite in the compound. No pressure, no expectations, just time." Kayla told her mother, Diane, about the New Metro dinner, then called again 2 days before flying when Tariq's plans changed. He texted Kayla with regret, unavoidable rerouting, a canceled meeting, and offered something grander, fly to Noor instead. He'd arrange everything. She'd meet his mother at last. That line, "My mother can't wait to meet you," lodged like a wish inside Kayla's chest. Men didn't introduce women to their mothers casually. "Okay," she typed, fingers shaking. Nor it is Lena's plan never shifted. Adel would send a driver. She would be welcomed by family. It would be dreamy and safe. Her father couldn't shake a feeling he couldn't name. "At least meet him first somewhere public," Victor urged. "I will be surrounded by family and the staff of a small city," she countered. "I'm safer there than in a bar at home." She believed that. She wasn't wrong, not in the way that counts for ordinary life. But she hadn't accounted for a stage set by people who turned safety signals into props. Both women packed. Kayla loaded a carry-on with sundresses and sandals and texted Anna, "I can't believe this is real." Lena folded conservative outfits into neat stacks, tossed a Seattle-designed bracelet into a velvet pouch as a token for Adele's mother, and checked her passport again. She promised her parents frequent updates. She meant it. The last 48 hours crawled. Tariq's and Adele's messages crescendoed. "I haven't slept picturing the moment I finally take your hand. I've planned a welcome that you'll never forget." When Kayla's flight lifted into a midnight sky, she snapped a selfie in the lounge, a flute of champagne, a grin, and posted, "Big leap." Desert lights next? Dozens wished her safe travels. On the airplane Wi-Fi between Milan and Zahara, she messaged Tariq, "Just a few more hours." He asked her, with courtly apologies, not to text during the drive from the airport. Security protocols, privacy. She complied. It seemed respectful, almost royal. Lena boarded the next day, upgraded her seat as a treat, and typed to her parents, "Boarding." "I'll text when I land. Love you." "Love, love, love," her mother replied. "We're proud of you." On the long overnight, Lena toggled between ebooks and stray work docs, imagining a courtyard with lanterns and polished stone. Falcon Air touched down in Zahara City at 6:23 p.m. Kayla breezed through immigration, followed the signs to arrivals, and found a man in a black suit waiting with a printed card. He didn't smile much. He took her bag and ushered her into a waxed black sedan with chilled water in the back seat. "The estate is 45 minutes, he said in formal English. "His Highness sends apologies, urgent family business." "He will arrive shortly," she nodded, pulse fluttering. She reached for her phone to text her mother, but the driver turned in his seat with a polished apology. "Please, no devices in the car. The family asks discretion." Kayla slipped the phone back into her purse. It was believable. Everything had been believable so far. They left the glitter of towers for half-built expanses. New villas rose from sand like white shells. The guard waved them through a high gate. The house they approached had arches and a fountain and perfectly trimmed hedges. There were staff at the door, a matronly woman in an embroidered gown, 2 young women in soft colors. The man who stepped out to greet Kayla was not the man from the video calls. He resembled him in silhouette, similar age, similar posture, but his jawline was wrong. "Welcome," he said with warmth. "I am Tariq's cousin Ashraf. He is on the phone with my uncle. He begged me to receive you with honor so he can come to you fresh." A motherly woman embraced Kayla and said something in Arabic. Ashraf translated, "She says you are even more luminous than the screen allowed." Upstairs, a guest suite waited with a balcony facing a walled garden. The bed was turned down. Fresh water beaded on a tray. 30 minutes, one of the young women said kindly. Then we share dinner. Kayla tried to send a text. No network. She told herself she'd use Wi-Fi after dinner, showered travel from her skin, put on a silk shirt that made her feel like a woman in an old movie, and went down to the candle-lit dining room. The water tasted faintly different, mineral, she told herself. The room blurred at the edges. Jet lag, she thought. Ashraf's reassuring blend of apology and promise followed her upstairs. Rest, he said. We'll dine when you wake. The last thing she saw clearly was the curve of his smile, flattening into something like relief, Lena's. Arrival 12 hours later followed. The same choreography, but did not land the same way. The driver at the airport, another polished man with a card, collected her. The highway thinned to a private road between cream-colored walls. They arrived at a villa that seemed like a magazine spread. But Lena noticed things Kayla didn't. Brand new art hung a fraction off level, no family photos, a faint scent of fresh paint. The man who welcomed her introduced himself as Adele's brother Omar. He blamed state obligations for Adele's absence. Lena's stomach tightened. I'll just go to a hotel and come back tomorrow, she said, polite but firm. Omar's smile was smooth. You are already home, he said. Please call your parents from the study. The phone on the desk was a prop. It didn't work. When Lena turned, Omar stood in the doorway. The pleasant tone vanished. Please don't do anything foolish, he said quietly. She tried to run anyway. She made it to the hall before two men closed around her like doors. What happened next did not need to be graphic to be monstrous. A sedative. A locked room hidden behind a false wall. Questions Lena answered with fragments. Passwords pulled from fog. A woman who had trained her mind to notice details. Notice them she did. She tried to sign in a way that would fail. She tried to say numbers that didn't quite match. She gave wrong answers where she could, right ones when she had to. She stayed stubborn. But they had time and practice, and they had her phone. Kayla never woke to see the face of the man who had sent all those messages. She died in a basement that had been soundproofed. She did not suffer long. It was the only mercy in a house designed to deny mercy. Her killer did not grieve. She was less a person to him than a ledger line to cash. The men were not royalty. The one Kayla knew as Tariq was actually a 38-year-old named Faisal Nader Kazmi, a national of a South Asian republic to Noor's east. He had been living in Zahara City since 2012, drifting between expat circles and shady deals. The one who called himself Adele was Imran Salim Khanna, a 35-year-old with real business front companies and a knack for passing as something grander than he was. They ran with 5 others who formed a cleanly cut enterprise. Bilal Yunus, a quiet man with gifts for fake profiles and encrypted channels. Nabil Farouk, logistics, keys, vehicles, properties, cleaners. Karim Haddad, the money, cryptocurrency, shell corporations, laundering within laundering. Yusuf Alam, a driver who did what he was told. And Safia Karim, a cousin pressed into greeting duties who believed she was setting plates, not traps. They didn't pick women at random. They built profiles like dossiers. They combed public posts, cross-referenced workplace bios, added up net worth from the edges. Kayla had told Tariq in a tender moment that she'd increased her life insurance after the divorce because she wanted her mother to feel secure. She shared that she had a small condo, a retirement account, some savings. Lena had joked about stock options she hadn't sold yet, and her parents pushing her to get more insurance now that she was in her mid-30s. They logged it all. They weren't always killers. Most of the time, they targeted women for money and disappeared when the accounts dried out. But in high-value cases, women with assets and thin local footprints, they took more. Murder was an occasional business decision. A cold calculus put plainly on a shared spreadsheet. Profit potential, exposure risk, timeline, compliance. While Kayla's mother left increasingly worried voicemails that went unheard, Imran posed as Lena and texted her parents about sunshine and spices and festival drums. He had months of Lena's tone memorized. He knew she used emojis at the end of sentences, not in the middle. He knew she sent photos in bursts and then went quiet. He sent pictures of courtyard tiles and sunset dunes pulled from travel accounts and from within the compound's walls. On March 18th, after days wringing what they could from Lena's sedated mind and shaking hands, the men drove her into the desert under a sky scattered with hard stars. They wanted the scene to be orderly. Lena, drugged but not erased, understood in a dim way what the night meant. She fought to stay in control, of breath, of posture, of one last decision. It didn't change what happened. They killed her outside the car, then covered what they had done with sand and the kind of carefulness that comes from practice. She was 35. She was loved. By the time anyone in authority realized 2 Americans were missing, the first 48 hours had gone. Diane, Kayla's mother, called her daughter's phone until the voicemail filled. She called the airline. They confirmed Kayla had landed. She called the number Kayla had given her for Tariq. It rang and rang. When she called local police in Arizona, the officer was kind but bound by policy. "Your daughter is an adult who chose to travel," he explained gently. "It hasn't been long enough." The embassy in Noor took a report, made a file, and began the slow process of checking quietly. In Rainhaven, the Joe household felt reassured by Lena's cheerful texts. A message arrived on the 17th. "You were right to worry, but I'm being spoiled. Adele's family is so kind. No time to call, so much to see. Talk soon." It fit. It didn't. Helen smiled and showed Victor the photos. He nodded, half convinced. They didn't know their daughter's phone was in a stranger's hand. Diane did not wait. On March 19th, she hired a private investigator with a reputation for finding people overseas. Derek Shaw opened his laptop and pulled Kayla's emails and messages with Tariq. He traced a number to a disposable SIM, an address to a rented mailbox. He sent still images to a court historian in Noor, Dr. Noura Hadari, who maintained lineages and family trees. "There is no such person as Sheikh Tariq bin Saif al-Khatani," she told him after 3 days of searching. "There is a Tariq in the extended al-Khatani kinship, but he is elderly and has never used any dating service. The man your client spoke to is fiction." Shaw contacted the FBI's International Operations Unit. Special Agent Maya Ortiz, a veteran of trafficking and cyber fraud cases, took the case seriously. She called Interpol. She called Noor's Ministry of Interior. She called the U.S. consular team in Zahara City and said, "Put eyes on the airport cameras." Meanwhile, Diane combed Kayla's cloud backups. She found albums Kayla had saved of Tariq's photos. Shaw ran reverse image searches. Dozens were lifted from a real Noor businessman's public feed on Instapic. That man, a suave entrepreneur named Hamid Al-Sayed, was horrified. "Those are my photos," he said in a long-distance call. "I post for art and business. I didn't know they were being used to hurt anyone." He surrendered his travel logs to prove he had been in Singapore when Tariq claimed to be in Zahara City, in Riyadh when Tariq supposedly walked through a garden on video. On March 25th, the tapestry was starting to show its pattern. Kayla had landed, then vanished into an unregistered address. Her cards hadn't been used. Her phone had been off since she left the airport. There was only the grainy blessing of cameras, footage of Kayla exiting arrivals, smiling with jet-lag brightness, following a driver with a sign. The driver's face was visible in one frame. An algorithm enhanced, a detective paused the clip, printed it, and pinned it to a board. The car, a black sedan, had a partial plate, enough for Noor's traffic database. It belonged to a legitimate car service. The booking was paid through a company account for a firm that existed only on paper. Commander Layla Al-Numan of Zahara City Police, who ran the unit focused on crimes against visitors, assembled a core team and started making calls. She had seen versions of this pattern before. She hadn't seen 2 in a row.
She hadn't seen it anchored by a network this disciplined. 3 days later, the charade collapsed in Rainhaven, too.
A manager at Aurora Dynamics called the Joe home. "Is Lena still traveling?" he asked, cautious. She missed her Monday return. She missed her big Tuesday presentation. "That is not like her." Victor and Helen fell into cold clarity. They went back through the texts. The punctuation was slightly off. The rhythm felt wrong. They called the police. The consulate flagged a second American missing. Agent Ortiz saw the lines match. 2 different women. Identical method, same destination. Noor police searched an apartment registered to a man named Faisal Nadir Kazmi in the Marina District. It had been sanitized, fresh paint, empty closets, but the forensic team found a laptop tucked behind a sink trap where a sloppy mover had missed it. It had been wiped. Not well enough. Digital forensics is patient work. The technicians pulled shards like pottery from a fire pit. They rebuilt messages, spreadsheets, folders with women's names and notes. Teacher in Lyon, doctor from Hamburg, California attorney. They found photos and video fragments taken inside the villa. Women's ankles in motion, a bracelet falling into a chair slipcover, a corner of tile that would turn out to be unique to a development on the edge of the city, Golden Dunes Enclave. They found a spreadsheet with 67 names, columns for assets, relatives, risk, and a column labeled outcome. Most said extract. 8 said final. Layla put a tactical team together and hit the villa at dawn on March 31st. The place was empty. 2 days earlier, the men had cleared out, repainted, and replaced carpets. Cleaners had done their work well. But the blue light of forensic reagents revealed erasures. Drains told the truth. Hair in the pipes spoke. DNA did the rest. It said plainly 2 American women were here. It said one of them lost her life on the basement floor. Layla stepped out into the morning heat, looked toward the expanse of tan beyond the walls, and said, "Have the satellite guys pull every image they have for 100 kilometers. The Ministry of Development had near-daily imagery for land planning. Analysts compared the shape of the desert on March 14th with March 18th. 2 disturbances appeared where nothing had been before. Ground teams drove out in vehicles with heavy tires and quiet engines. They fanned out with poles and drones. On April 3rd, they found a body. On April 4th, they found another. For a moment, the desert seemed to hold its breath. The calls Diane and the Joes received were as careful as human speech can be when it is a knife. "We found your daughter. She was a victim of homicide. We are so sorry." Diane collapsed on a couch and woke hoarse. Victor had to sit down on the floor because the chair felt like a betrayal. Helen pressed her hands to her face and kept them there for a long time. From there, the work of justice accelerated in a way that rarely happens beyond TV scripts. Layla's team rolled up the edges of the network. The money man, Karim Haddad, made the classic error of thinking a neighboring country would be safer. Interpol flagged him in an internet cafe in Manama. Police took him without drama. He gave them all he had in exchange for a sentence he could bear. Nabil Farouk, the logistics captain, was still in Zahara City when they grabbed him. He'd assumed his role was too indirect to matter. He was wrong. Bilal and Yusuf were taken in Al-Qamar, Noor's administrative capital. Safia was arrested with tears and confusion. Over days of careful interviews, it became clear she had been pulled into the hospitality charade by a cousin she trusted and did not know the design of the house she was helping to furnish. Only 2 ran far. Faisal slipped across borders through a mountainous district into a place with poor extradition habits, a region we'll call Oristan, where money buys delay. Imran fled to a cousin's home in a northern city and waited. Agent Ortiz flew to the capital of Oristan with binders and a speech. She met with generals and ministers who were sensitive to their country's image and faith being dragged through the mud. "These men claim to be pious," she said, "but used faith and hospitality as camouflage for murder. Help us redeem that story." 3 days later, a raid hit a safe house near the Oristan frontier. Faisal shot first. Bullets came back. He didn't die that day, but he left on a stretcher. Within the week, Imran walked out of a house in Lahore district and surrendered. He had been having nightmares about a woman's voice shouting his name. He wanted the dreams to stop. By May 1st, 7 men and 1 woman were in custody. Within months, an indictment in Noor's highest court named them for what they were: a cross-border criminal enterprise that used online romance to commit fraud, kidnapping, and murder. Prosecutors put the laptop on a screen in a courtroom. They walked judges through columns and dates, wire transfers and crypto keys, call logs and car bookings. They brought in experts to show how photos were stolen and doctored. They played snippets of voice calls. They pulled up security footage of Kayla stepping into a car and of a man in a black driver's cap glancing left and right. The defense did what defenses do, tried to fracture responsibility, called their clients misguided minimized roles. It's always hard to find mercy in a spreadsheet with a column labeled final. It's harder when a cooperating defendant stands in a courtroom and explains the business as if walking through a pitch deck. "We targeted women who wanted connection and had resources," Karim said, his voice flat. "We were careful at first. We got bolder. We had rules. Kill only when necessary. Necessary meant when the risk was too high and the payout too large to walk away." "Did you feel remorse?" the prosecutor asked. Karim swallowed. "Not then," he said. "Now, yes. But now is late." Faisal sat silent, a bandage under his shirt where the bullet scar healed. He stared at the floor. He acted like a man contemplating a stain. Imran tried a different tactic. He blamed the women. He blamed social media. He blamed Western decadence. The judges asked him whether he understood why a mother shouted across the room, "You murdered my daughter." He did not answer. The sound of that mother's voice didn't leave the walls of that courtroom for a long time. 6 weeks after the first day of trial, sentences were read. Faisal and Imran were convicted on every count and sentenced to death, with the understanding that Noor's appeals process could stretch for years and that death sentences are often converted to life terms. Nabil received life. Bilal received 35 years. Karim got 20 for cooperation. Yusuf, the driver, received 30. Safia was convicted of conspiracy and fraud, not murder. She received 10. In Arizona and Washington, grief curdled into action. Diane founded a nonprofit in her daughter's name, the Kayla Monroe Initiative for Digital Safety. Its goal: teach people to spot grooming before they're invested, to force platforms to verify identities, to give families of the missing a playbook for transnational crises. "If I can't save Kayla," Diane said into microphones she never wanted to face, "maybe we can save someone else's child." The foundation partnered with dating platforms to add prominent pause to verify prompts when conversations moved off the app too quickly. It taught red flags in plain language, moving too fast, insisting on secrecy, deflecting voice or video calls, evasive answers about family and work, urgent invitations to foreign travel, probing questions about finances dressed as intimacy. "We all rationalize what we want," one pamphlet read. "The trick is to listen for what doesn't fit, not what you wish were true." The Joes chose a different memorial. They created the Lena Joe Scholarship at Rainhaven State University to fund women in computer science. Lena believed technology should help people, Victor said, choking up. She would want her name on something that advances someone else's chance. Helen joined Diane for talks in Chinese American community centers about the pressure to be private, about the danger of shame keeping people from asking for help. "Silence is heir to predators," she said. "We can't feed them. Law enforcement learned too." Agent Ortiz took the case's lessons on the road. She argued for a centralized romance scam database to connect local complaints that look unrelated but are threads of one cloth. By 2023, the system existed. Analysts saw patterns earlier. Arrests came sooner. Interpol set up a romance fraud cell. Noor's police created a tourist victim unit. The Ministry of Justice expanded its digital forensics lab. Cleaners who took cash jobs learned to call a hotline if asked to paint a house at 3 a.m. Platforms responded in ways large and small. The parent company of several major dating apps rolled out optional ID verification for profiles that wanted to claim high-status identities. Messages that contained certain patterns, grand declarations in the first week, invitations to move to encrypted chats, requests to avoid calls, triggered subtle warnings. Slow it down. Seek proof. A year later, pop-up encouraged users to check in with a friend about a new long-distance romance. Photogram and Streamline cracked down on image theft with invisible watermarking and a simplified report button for impersonation. A businessman whose photos had been stolen watermarked his portfolio and launched a campaign encouraging influencers to do the same. He said, "Someone borrowed my face to hurt people." That possibility had never occurred to me before. A documentary premiered at a festival in Utah in 2024. Gilded Mirage told the story with restraint, using interviews with investigators and families, muted reenactments, and the kinds of pauses that let viewers feel what words cannot carry. Diane worked with the producers to ensure the film honored Kayla. The Joes declined on-camera interviews, but allowed the use of Lena's college photos. The film didn't end with handcuffs. It ended in a garden planted in memory of people like Kayla and Lena, a bronze of 2 women, one reaching back, one reaching forward. Academics wrote papers. One from Westlake University surprised readers who had held quiet prejudices about who gets caught in romance scams. "Intelligence doesn't protect you," the lead researcher said. "In fact, high-achieving women can be targeted precisely because they've learned to trust credentials and competence in professional contexts." Scammers present those signals convincingly. The study recommended training people to verify identities, not just parse resumes. By 2025, Faisal and Imran were still in Noor prisons awaiting the slow grind of appeals. Their death sentences had been upheld in the first round. Rumors swirled about commutations. Some victims' families wanted certainty. Others, like Diane, said, "I don't care whether they die in a room with witnesses or in a cell at 87. I care that they never walk outside again and that their methods are exposed so the next Kayla recognizes the trap while the door is still open." Nabil, in prison, found religion, and wrote letters the Monroe family burned unread. Bilal taught computer literacy to other inmates and was rumored to be a candidate for parole in 2 decades. His possible release stirred outrage in some quarters and thoughtful debate in others about proportional sentencing. Karim kept cooperating from his cell, sending investigators details about other networks he had heard whispers of during his years laundering for more than one crew. Yusuf, who had spent so much of his life doing what he was told, expressed remorse. Safiya served 5 years and returned home with a face aged beyond those years. None of it restored what was taken. There is no sentence long enough to balance the scales for a stolen life. There are only choices we make afterward: to strangle shame, to speak plainly, to insist on patterns that protect other people will never meet. The case altered the way families talk to each other. People who once might have rolled their eyes at a friend's long-distance relationship now ask questions with gentleness and bravery. What's his last name? Where does he work? Have you seen him live on FaceTime, like really live? Does anyone else know him? If you love him, you can slow down. That doesn't kill a good thing. It saves one. It changed the way police departments read missing person reports. A woman in San Diego went on a date with a consul and didn't come home. 2 days later, she turned up safe because a hotel night manager recognized markers from a flyer the Monroe Initiative had distributed. Look for staged opulence. Look for staff who don't know family names. Look for drivers who discourage devices. It changed the way consulates script advice. Visiting someone you met online? The pamphlet asks. Here's what to do. Share itineraries and addresses with 2 people you trust. Arrange first meetings in your country if possible. Bring a friend. Choose public places. Secure your own lodging. Keep your passport in your control. Set daily check-in times with a code word that means everything is fine, and a different one that means I need help. For all that, the world isn't safe yet. Romance scams persist like mutations. Some criminals pivoted to crypto romance. Some leaned into older frauds dressed in new clothes. But after Kayla and Lena, more people know the signposts. More families refuse to be quiet. More officers make calls after midnight. More platforms flag a bright red heart wrapped in a net. One spring afternoon in 2024, Diane and Helen met in person for the first time at a memorial garden. They had spoken for hours on the phone and typed hundreds of messages. They had become the kind of friends who tell the truth without apology. They stood together in front of a sculpture, 2 women hand in hand, and cried as if they were the only 2 people in the world. Our daughters should have met at a tech conference, Helen said softly, or at a hiking trailhead. They would have loved each other's company. Instead, they share headlines. Diane nodded. And that's not fair. It will never be fair. But if their names can pry open one closed door or make one woman listen to a prickle at the back of her neck, then we keep saying them. There's a scene that stays with one of the detectives. Commander Layla Al-Newman keeps it to herself most days, but sometimes she describes it to recruits learning this work. It's not the desert. It's not the courtroom. It's a small thing, a dog-eared book of poetry, found in a drawer at the villa during the first raid. The name inside the cover wasn't Kayla's or Lena's. It was the name of a woman in a different case, a year earlier, who had gotten away after losing money and pride. The book was Gibran. On the title page, in tidy English, someone had written, I wish you could see yourself the way I see you. Then a flourish of ink. Then nothing. Layla keeps that image for the days when the job feels impossible. People deserve to be seen the way they really are. Not as assets, not as opportunities, as whole. We say their real names here, names we've chosen to tell this story anew because in this telling the words are our own. A woman from Mesa Vista, steady and kind, who loved sunrises on stone and a dog named Scout. A woman from Rainhaven who could write clean code in the morning and cook soup like her mother taught her at night. They did what humans do. They reached for connection. Men waiting with practiced charm turned that reach into a rope. The men who built the rope are caged now. The house they staged has been demolished. The development it sat in has new rules. The airline that flew the women there updated their safety emails. The apps added bright warnings. The embassy pamphlet got longer. The private investigator's phone still rings every week. If you're listening and you're currently messaging with someone whose life seems cut from a glossy magazine, if the story is so perfect that it makes your breath catch, read these words as a hand on your shoulder. Gentle and insistent. Verify, pause, ask for proof, tell a friend. Anyone worth your heart can handle caution. And if you are a mother or a father or a friend listening to someone you love, describe a fairy tale. Remember Diane and Helen. Ask questions without mocking. Offer a ride. Offer a spare room. Offer to be the text that pings at dinner time. Be the reason a phone lights up in a car and the driver frowns and the woman says, "I'll reply anyway," and taps send. The legacy of two Americans murdered in a desert city is not only tragedy and punishment, it is the stubborn goodness of people who refuse to let their daughters vanish into statistics. It is the way their stories are now taught in police academies and high school digital safety classes and corporate lunch and learns. It is the scholarship recipients who send Helen and Victor notes about first patents and second chances. It is the hike Diane takes every spring on the trail Kayla loved most, where she says out loud, "I'm doing the work, kid, I'm doing it." And a gust of warm wind lifts the hair off her neck. Every time a victim's family doesn't have to sell their car to bring a body home from abroad because the Monroe Initiative paid the bill, every time a hotel clerk calls a number on a wallet card and stops something bad from happening, every time a young woman hears a voice in her head say, "Real love can wait," it echoes from that villa's empty rooms and replaces some small part of what was lost. We can't unspool what those men did. We can't offer parents the years they should have had. We can't promise the next terrible idea won't slip through the cracks. But we can carry torchlight into the places men like Faisal and Imran thought were perfectly dark. We can remind each other what love is supposed to feel like, patient, transparent, anchored in reality. If you're feeling spun in stories, if you're in love with a person whose life exists mostly in messages and carefully framed screens, slow down. Ask for a live hello. Take them into the sunlight of your life and see if they belong there. Kayla Monroe and Lena Joe, and all the women whose names fill columns in unreleased spreadsheets, deserved better. They deserved someone who would cross a country for them without a mask. They deserved to grow older without becoming a warning. They deserved an ordinary happiness, a tender shoulder, a morning routine, laughter in a kitchen while something simmers. We remember them tenderly. We say their names because memory, too, is a form of justice, and we tell their story not to frighten, but to arm, to draw a sharper line between a message that charms and a message that hunts, so that the next time a woman smiles at her phone on the way to an airport, the next line in her story is different.
She calls a friend.
She cancels a car. She chooses a public place. She meets a real person or walks away whole. And then she goes home.